Conspirinormal podcast proudly presents the Strange Realities Conference. Strange Realities. Come join us for one day of presentations on the paranormal with live music at night featuring Tim Banal,
The Rise and Fall of the Flat Earth Theory,
Joshua Cutchin,
Alien Hybrid Lore,
Joe Damari,
Pushing the Limits of Reality,
Guy Malone,
Roswell 1947, What Really Happened,
Timothy Renner,
Pennsylvania Wildman,
and added to the lineup, Mark Anthony Wyatt,
Cornish Legends and UFO Sightings,
Zach Hunt,
presentation of his book Unraptured,
followed by a live recording of the Conspirinormal podcast. More speakers and music acts to be announced. October 19, 2019, SIR Nashville.
Tickets and info at www.strangerealitiesconference.com. $40 at the door, $30 pre-sale.
This is Conspirinormal, where the nexus of conspiracy theory and the paranormal meet. And now, we join the show already in progress with your hosts, Adam and Seriah.
Welcome to Conspirinormal, guys.
Deja vu.
Yep. We just did a hour and a half long show with Seriah from Where Did the Road Go. We're doing this a little bit different because we closed out the show with him already, and we talked about several things in this interview that were really interesting. I talked a little bit about Sex Magick with Seriah. And anytime we have Seriah on, it's just kind of a stream of consciousness flow. But also, I got to talk a little bit to Seriah about his personal experiences and kind of like his own journey into like the occult and all kinds of interesting stuff there. So I thought that, that would be good to talk to him because I haven't really actually talked to him about that stuff.
Yeah, we got a lot deeper into some occult stuff than I've ever talked to him about.
Yeah, so this one is really interesting, guys, and this is our little Swapcast with Seriah between us and Where Did the Road Go, so we guys hope you enjoy it. Just a few things. You'll hear us talk about it at the end of this show, but Strange Realities Conference is still going on here in Nashville, Tennessee on October 19th of this year. If you guys haven't heard about Strange Realities, I don't know where you've been, or you've obviously, maybe this is the first time you've listened to this show. So because we have been talking about it ad infinitum, making nuisances of ourselves, to please go to strangerealitiesconference.com, guys. If you want to help us out, buy a ticket there, pre-sale, go to strangerealitiesconference.com, go to the book now that you see, that will take you straight to the Eventbrite. I have also put the Eventbrite link to it on our show notes. So whenever you see Conspirinormal come up on your iTunes, you will see it there. That's also, I don't know if that's on Spotify or whatever, wherever you listen, but it's right there for you guys to take advantage of that $30 price, prepaid, all the way up until October 18th.
There'll be a lot of exclusive information in some of these talks, yet to be published information by some pretty cool authors with groundbreaking books just around the corner.
Yep.
So you can get a real heads up.
Yeah, as we talked about in the last show. And also, guys, Patreon still out there, still in effect. It's just $1 to become a Patreon for us. That'll get you access for, I believe it's 20 something shows now. And plus, we're about to put some more Patreon material that's for our next show that we recorded before this show. It's getting really confusing now. Whoa. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning as we're recording this, but we just want to tell you about that. Please, you want to help out the show, you can do it that way. You can also, on the Conspirinormal.com website, you can leave us a donation there as well if you don't want the recurring thing. And leave us a review on iTunes. Preferably a 5-star one if you really like the show. That really helps us out as well, and also helps us get feedback from you guys too. And don't forget, the YouTube channel is also there. Even if you listen to the show on just purely podcasts and you don't like the video thing, because some people don't, then you just go to YouTube, subscribe. Just subscribe. That'll help us out too. So that's basically it for all the show notes, guys. We really hope you enjoy this wonderful, awesome interview with Seriah Azkath from Where Did the Road Go?
If you want your HR team to hire top talent for your company, tell them about ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology identifies people with the right skills, education, and experience, and actively invites them to apply to your company's job posts, so you get qualified candidates fast. It's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the U.S. This rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with over 1,000 reviews. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Conspirinormal. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Conspirinormal. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
We're back on Conspirinormal, guys, and this one is really special because we're doing a Swapcast with my favorite podcast at the moment, Where Did the Road Go?
Is it at the moment because I'm on the show with you?
Yeah, at the moment because you're on the show with us. Yeah, yeah. We, like Seriah, you have been a really good supporter of this show.
I love your show.
Thank you. I love yours. You. I consider this show, your show, are like, I guess, our sister or brother show. Very much so, because when
we're like Mexico to you.
About a few years ago, 2015, when we first got on the IPBN network, this is how long ago this was, right? I was checking to see whenever Rocky was playing my show, and I run across this episode with these three guys talking. I had no idea who any of you guys were at the time. But it was one of the UFO ones. It was you, Cleland, and Gullius. Yeah.
Yep.
And you guys were talking about the 1980s stuff, and that was the very first show that I ever heard. Just randomly ran across it on that stream, and I was just like, these guys are right up my alley. And I just started checking out your show and would catch a few here and there, and probably really started religiously listening to Where Did the Road Go about every week, probably about like early 2016, and got a hold of you, had you on the show, and ever since then, I don't miss an episode now. So, and I've had the privilege of being on the show on the Roundtable episodes fairly
regularly.
Yeah, fairly regularly. We just did one, we're recording this on Tuesday, the 10th of September. And we did one on Friday, so you'll probably by the time this will be up, probably I think after that, But we just did one. We just did one pretty regularly.
That one for me will air on September 14th. That was a really good listener story one.
Yeah. That really was. I mean, that one story that was like rather long. That with the three. The two figures and the three guys, and that was, I won't go into any detail on it, but that was rather fascinating. Yeah.
That's something that's really cool with your show and Strange Familiars. You guys have those audience stories. We do occasionally we do get some, but you guys, the way you've incorporated that into like a regular feature is really cool.
And Strange Familiars gets them more than I do.
Right.
Because his show, I think, is most, geared toward that at this point, like investigations and talking to regular people about these things and stuff like that.
Experience, really, more than anything.
Yeah. Whereas I mix it up into the whole mix of everything else.
And your show is more like ours, where you have the guest, and then like occasionally we do the round tables, and I'm starting to do some of those too. Like we just did that, like the 2 Woke in the 90s series that we just did. It's just, flat out copying you, Seriah, but that's the imitation. Imitation really is the best form of flattery.
It's not quite copying.
So we're honored to be on this like Swapcast with you. like I said, you have one of the best shows out there. So,
well, thank you.
We were going to get into this subject with another guest, and I had to reschedule that, and we'll still have that up in about a couple of weeks, I believe. But you did a couple of shows, I think, just recently on like this whole concept of like sex magic. Yeah.
Well, probably more tantra than sex magic, but yeah.
Okay. What's the difference there between tantra and sex magic? Because I've always equated them as being the same thing.
There's crossovers, but tantra is energy based. Sex magic doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with energy. It can.
Is it Western and Eastern also?
Huh?
Is it Western and Eastern as far as like tantra is more Eastern or comes from?
Yeah, the concepts definitely come from Eastern teachings, and tantra. If I'm remembering right, tantra is more than just like sex magic. I think there's a whole beliefs or not belief system, but a lot of writings that are not about sexual stuff.
Yeah,
dealing with tantra, because everyone always associates it. So looking it up real quick, just so I get the definition right. Tantra denotes the esoteric traditions of Hinduism and Buddhism that co-developed most likely about the middle of the first millennium AD. The term Tantra in the Indian traditions also means any systematic, broadly applicable text, theory, system, method, instrument, technique, or practice.
Very broad.
Yes, yeah. But
a lot of that comes from the control of like of the body and of
and energy and so on and so forth.
And so sex magic would be more in line, I guess, with like a Western esoteric tradition and maybe more like more recent.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily recent. If you look back to like, more recent than Tantra, definitely.
Sure.
But if you look back, like someone like Austin Osman Spare, he would take bottles and create sigils and put the sigils in the bottles and then have a sexual release into those bottles, and then he'd go bury them. If I'm remembering the methodology right, that's what he would do. And that was his sex magic practice. And you get a lot of chaos magicians who do something very similar to that. I believe Ren had a crude way of putting it to you. But,
yeah.
You know, it's basically masturbating onto a sigil.
Right.
And that's, a very simplistic sort of thing. And I think that stuff tends to work because at the point of orgasm, you have sort of a disconnect. Your different levels of consciousness kind of merge for a moment, or at least this consciousness kind of disconnects for a second.
And the fluid is charged, potentially.
Right. Yes. It's as charged as blood is. And I don't know why those things make a difference, but they do. Like there's something about our energy that survives in this stuff.
And the kind of like a general discrepancy between the two, at least in the popular imagination, would be that a lot of the tantric stuff too is about delaying orgasm, and some of this newer sex magic is about harnessing the power of orgasm itself.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, with Tantra, it's not just delaying orgasm, but it's building energy.
Yeah.
So, you build it to a point you don't have an orgasm. See, there's also a right and left-hand path Tantra practices. Yeah. So, like the right-hand path, you never have an orgasm. You're supposed to get to the point where that energy and that fluid turns inwards at the point of orgasm.
Is that what Sting does?
I have no idea what Sting does. And as soon as you say
doesn't he
Sting,
talk about that? Like
I don't follow Sting at all.
Yeah, but I think he says that like he's like he can go for hours or something like that.
It takes me a moment to realize you're not talking about the wrestler.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, right, yeah. Sting, the Police. That's what I.
But continue, please.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could potentially, but I mean, anyone could if you let it build and wane here and there. Plus, it builds up your tolerance if you do that. But I mean, there are solo practices in Tantra where a Tantra practitioner would literally have an orgasm without expelling anything.
Uh-huh.
And the idea would be that would be completely changed into internal energy. Mostly for things like Kundalini raising.
Right.
And, So right-hand path is sort of the abstaining from, and the left-hand path is, indulging in and using the energy.
And that would also tie into more recent New Thought ideas of sexual sublimation, even popularized by like Napoleon Hill and stuff like that.
I don't know that much about that.
Well, yeah, some of the New Thought guys really took those kind of ideas about harnessing sexual energy and
really
calling it there's like a whole chapter in Think and Grow Rich about that's kind of downplayed.
Really?
Yeah the art of sexual sublimation or something like that. He's talking about the same thing. He's talking about using and directing.
That's Dale Carnegie's Think and Grow Rich.
No, Napoleon Hill. Yeah,
okay.
But still was just as popular, but that even continued into that. So those ideas are, have been out there for a long time, popularized in Western culture too.
I mean, and the thing is, if you're with someone who actually can harness energy as well and control it, then, you can utilize both people's energy. But I think too, the difference between like the sigil masturbatory magic is that you have a specific goal. You're trying to perform a ritual for a specific result. Whereas like the more tantric stuff is for raising energy, enlightenment, things like that.
Right. A higher spiritual goal.
Right. Yeah. It's a more spiritual goal to the whole thing. Not that you couldn't use it otherwise, but it lends itself to a more spiritual goal a lot easier.
Well, what is the association with Sex Magick and I guess Crowley?
Oh, Crowley experimented with everything. So Crowley loved Sex Magick. I mean, Crowley was openly bisexual in a time period where it was illegal. I mean, really illegal. So he had sex with everyone and everything. He came up with some really messed up rituals. Like at one point he tried to have his wife have sex with a goat, and his goal was to have the goat in her while he killed it.
Parental advisory.
Yeah.
That's to put it mildly. And I think it didn't work. And I think like he couldn't get the goat interested in his wife. And
put some hay or paper on her, man.
And so he ended up having sex with her and like cutting the goat's throat while they were having sex or something like that.
That's a typical Saturday night at Beliskin House.
That was some of the stuff went down at the Thelema, Abbey of Thelema in Italy.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering about that. Yeah, because that was probably at his point where he was like the most, I think, debauched and decadent.
Yeah,
was at Abbey of Thelema, and to the point where people actually died, like the one guy that died there.
Yep. Now, I don't remember the exact situation there, but yeah, one guy died there.
Right.
So there's also someone else that died with him in the desert, if I remember right, when he was doing the, what was the name of the demon? Coronazon that he was trying to summon. Yeah.
That was the whole abyss. Was that traversing the abyss thing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So... yeah, Crowley. I mean, Crowley was brilliant, but he wasn't always a good person.
Right, but what he got into, as far as like, I know Bram was talking about stuff. I've read speculations about the early OTO that there was already a lot of sex magic going on.
Yeah.
In the OTO,
just not on the level he took it to.
Right. But those ideas are really there, and the new OTOs really recently came to giving a lot of credit to Pastor Beverly Randolph for a lot of the sex magic ideas that Crowley developed. He at least was under a strong influence, though he kind of did it with a lot less moralism, because P.B. Randolph was very moralistic about it. This has to be in the bounds of marriage and this and that. But recently, they've really came out and given him a lot of credit. What's your thoughts on P.B. Randolph? Have you read a lot about him?
I don't know much about him at all.
I would. No, it's totally cool, man. I would recommend looking into it. He's founded one of the first Rosicrucian orders that wasn't through the Masons, as well as being a hashish importer. and a promoter of Sex Magick, and was a man of mixed race, half black, in America in the late 1800s. It's a fascinating story. You should definitely look into it. But he actually formed one of his magical brotherhoods here in Nashville that only lasted a few months, and that's one of my projects right now. I'm really trying to find out if I can find any more local information on it.
See, I lost interest in a lot of the organizational aspects of it. I kind of went off onto a chaos magic sort of path without realizing there was chaos magic, just because I didn't like a lot of the ceremony and pomp and circumstance around a lot of the stuff.
I totally understand. Well, sir, I don't know if I've ever asked you, but like, how does this journey into like this like chaos magic or the occult stuff, how'd that start for you?
Let's see. Where did that start for me?
It was heavy metal.
I was always interested in the paranormal. I think the first stuff I looked at was Wiccan, and I was really hesitant, but I had a friend, and she kept being, she was really into it, and she lent me a book, and I read the book and was like, oh, this is really interesting, because it was a nature religion and all this. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. And then I picked up, she lent me a couple other books, and at some point I'm like, they're treating it like this lineage of this ancient religion, but it's Wicca. And I didn't realize Wicca was created in the 1950s. And it only took a little bit of looking to realize, oh, this is all BS. This is
Gerald Gardner and all that. Yeah.
And so I kind of dropped away from that a little bit. And I had another friend who was really into Crowley and the Church of Satan. And so she's going, I initially stayed away from the Church of Satan stuff because it just, I didn't know anything about it. And I wasn't raised Christian necessarily. My parents were Christian by name. You know what I mean? Like, they were Christian because that's what you were supposed to be. They never went to church. They never did anything about it. My grandparents were very religious, but my exposure to religion was very slight. However, I was still brought up in that sort of mindset. So Satan, why would I want to do something that had something to do with Satan, And as I started reading Crowley, I started seeing some similarities in some of his experiences with mine. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And this woman kept going, read the Satanic Bible. It's not what you think. And so finally I broke down and read that and went, oh, this is like a socio-political type of thing. This is kind of interesting. And so it just kind of like kept going like that. But reading some of Crowley stuff and picking up, I read a lot of Israel Regardie, because Crowley was my main focus when I started reading this stuff. And I just really didn't like the ritualistic aspect. I didn't know if I even really believed in any of it until I started trying stuff and it worked. And I was like, oh, so that actually works. Interesting.
Well, what kind of stuff would you try?
Just little rituals to cause things to happen.
Okay.
And I wrote everything down because at some point it was put in my head that I needed to write everything down, not just the things I was doing, but the stuff going on around it, which made no sense to me until, I talked to people like Jeff Ritzman and Mike Cleland, who are like, well, what was happening at your life around that time? And I was going, oh my God, I can find out.
So was it to the point that you were having like these weird synchronicities? Was this the kind of thing that was going on?
It's been so long. And not a lot of that early stuff I didn't write down. I know I tried doing things like sending people dreams, and then I'd talk to the person the next day and I'd say, so did you have any interesting dreams last night, without telling them I did anything? And they'd be like, oh my God, I had a dream about you last night. And I'd be like, huh. And I was able to do it fairly consistently where I was like, okay, this actually seems to be a thing.
Well, just that mental breakthrough of realizing that you can do things like that.
Things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that gives you so much more power because now you believe in it, and we all know about the power of belief. So it's just from there.
And oddly enough, that I got that idea from King Diamond because on the Conspiracy record, one of the songs ends with, I will send you a dream. And I went, did you do that? Can you send someone a dream?
It's a great
and apparently
album.
You can.
He's got a lot of great stories, man. We should all try to get him on one of our shows. He's got all kinds of paranormal stories I've read.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I have an old interview up on the Last Exit page that was actually done on the Metallic Onslaught before any of the people who are now associated with it were doing it. But he's talking about doing like different rituals and stuff, and how at one point there was like this something in his house and it would growl at people.
He's like the coolest Danish guy too. He's like, he's awesome. And have you seen him a few times? Probably.
Oh yeah, quite a few times.
As a performer, I mean, it blew me away. All of that stuff. It's not studio. Like, he can hit all that live. It's crazy. The octaves.
Sometimes I've seen him when he can hit it, and I've seen it when he cannot.
Okay. Well, fair enough. I'll give it to when I saw him, man, he was on point. It was awesome.
And I also think if you're there live, you'd notice it less when he doesn't than like we had a bootleg from a show he did in Syracuse, and the show sounded great, but then when I listened to the recording, I'm going, doesn't sound as good on the recording. So I think the energy of being there gives you,
it's like auto-tune.
Yeah. You don't care as much. You're not hearing it as clear. It's loud. But when you're hearing it on a recording, you're listening at a more normal volume going, oh, he's a little off there.
Gotcha.
A little off there.
So for you, Seriah, the role that's kind of like the Kundalini awakening, I mean, what role did that play in all this?
Well, that was just a nightmare. That didn't play a direct role in any of it. I mean, that was just me not knowing what's wrong with me, you know? But it enhanced those abilities without me realizing that's what it was doing. It totally enhanced all that stuff. So the reason I could probably so easily do some of this stuff was because of the Kundalini.
So do you feel like you were able to transmute that Kundalini or sexual energy into transforming things in your life or in physical reality?
You phrase the question better.
Do you think that Kundalini awakening gave you more magical power to have a bigger influence?
Yes, I think it definitely changed the amount of influence. It supercharges you. It really does. I think it's whatever that energy is probably the energy we use to connect with the rest of the universe. I mean, everyone has Kundalini. It's not something that is unique to one or two people. Everyone has it. Everyone can wake it up. Most people won't and probably shouldn't. But I didn't have a choice. I was one of those people where it just woke up spontaneously, and there was almost no literature for that type of stuff at the time. I found out by finding a book in what's the book company? Llewellyn had a book called Kundalini and the Chakras, and I got that. That was the first book I read on Kundalini, and it was okay. It gave me a concept of what I was dealing with. It gave me some breathing exercises that helped me control it, and gave me a little bit of an understanding of it. But then I had to dig deeper into some more of the traditional sources to get any real grasp on how to deal with what I was dealing with, because the modern sort of stuff, especially the New Age stuff, doesn't treat a spontaneous awakening where suddenly it's just awake and doing what it wants, because that is what it does. It does whatever it wants, and you don't really get a say.
Yeah, it's just a spontaneous thing. It just starts happening to you. I remember you've said this before too, that when you had that happen to you and you read Communion, you drew some really interesting parallels between what happened to you and what was going on with Strieber, as he described in the book.
It wasn't the Kundalini. That was more the occult stuff. I have a notebook somewhere, and I think what I wrote down in the notebook was, so I'm having some of the same experiences that Strieber's having, except in my experiences, these things are being viewed as shadow entities and a sort of an occult viewpoint on it. And Strieber's getting it from like a UFO type viewpoint. But I'm like, but if I strip away the mask, what's happening is very, very similar. And I think it was Transformation that did it. I don't remember what in Transformation, but something in Transformation clicked, and I went, oh my God, I've had that happen, but because of a UFO experience, and I'm like, what if we're dealing with the same thing?
And so you've had a couple weird UFO experiences.
Yes. So they came much later. Like my first real UFO sighting wasn't until like 2000.
And you saw some was that the one where you saw like the huge mile-long craft or whatever?
Right.
Yeah.
That was the gigantic thing with incredibly bright lights that just slowly moved down into the lake.
Like it actually went into the lake?
I don't know. I couldn't see that far down.
Weird.
But it was dropping down.
Wow.
There was nothing under it but the lake.
Yeah. Like the USO kind of thing. Yeah.
And for all I know, it disappeared as soon as I lost sight of it. You know, it just blinked out. And again, that happened after probably the biggest shift in my life right there. That was just a couple months later. So not knowing that, when I went back to look, and I'm like, well, what was happening? Oh, that. It's like, yeah, I guess that would summon a big UFO.
But you know, you mentioned Jeff Ritzman, and we've never had him on this show, but you've had him on Where Did the Road Go quite a lot. Mm-hmm. But this whole idea of just like the liminal aspect of life, when you're in a liminal place in your life, these weird things start happening to you. Mm-hmm. So is that something that you've experienced as well?
Absolutely. I didn't know it. I mean, It wasn't till the fact that I kept all that information allowed me to look back and go, yeah, it is stuff happening right. It's not always, but some of the bigger events happened right when things were shifting or right after things shifted in my life.
Right.
And initially I thought it was because okay, so your life has changed and now you're noticing things you didn't notice before. And so now some of these paranormal things that may have been there all along are becoming more noticeable. When I talked to Hansen about it, who wrote Trickster and the Paranormal, he said that in his work, it has nothing to do with that. It's literally that this stuff appears in liminal structures. And I'm still not entirely sure what to make of that, other than the fact that if we're contributing to it, that maybe we need to be in that liminal state for that energy to kind of like interact stronger with the environment.
Well, maybe it's more about it's an agent of change.
Yeah, well, that's also a possibility.
Yeah, so when you're in the liminal state, you're moving from one to another. So it's an energy, maybe something like your Kundalini awakening or something similar. It pushes you into that, or it's a pull.
And Kripal at some point, and I don't know where I took the note, but he was on someone's show, and maybe it was Rune Soup, and he said the paranormal or the supernatural is something that happens to you when you need it, or when it matters, or something like that. Because he was talking about trying to distill the stuff in a lab, and he's like, the problem is there's nothing. It's not. It's so dry. It's just, let's try this. Let's try this. There's no emotional investment to it. Yeah. Whereas most paranormal stuff happens either because you need it to push you forwards, or because you're somehow emotionally invested in it.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can.
I can agree with that. I mean, I've told you this a million times, but I've had my experience when I was a child, mm-hmm. and that's kind of probably the biggest paranormal thing that I've ever have happened to me. Okay. But recently I've had weirder, just kind of, and it's kind of died down now a little bit, but I've just kind of had weirder synchronicities in my life.
You start hanging out with me.
Yeah. That have just, but it's like, what was weird was these things started to happen. I'm not going to go into any details because it revolves around a person. But these things started to happen when I took place in that angel summoning ritual that Ren did at Paramania.
Okay.
Right. And when I did that, it was just kind of a lark to me. I really didn't think anything of it. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I took it seriously, but I wasn't just okay, I felt more like an observer of that moment. But after it happened, these synchronicities and this weird stuff started to kind of happen. And it was this catalyst that actually kind of pushed me forward in life. So it was mm-hmm. I talked to Ren about this, and, he said, when you engage in magic, all of a sudden these things start to happen in your life. So is that something that in your experience that you've definitely encountered?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how I started actually getting into it, because that's exactly what happened is I kind of just, I didn't take it I can't say I didn't take it seriously, but I didn't think anything was going to work. So I just kind of threw it all out there. And then when I started getting responses back, the responses never stopped. You know, it completely changed the way I interfaced with the world and the way I reacted to the world around me. And I will say reading Crowley helped me deal with a lot of that stuff. There was a lot of things I took to heart that I read in his stuff where I was like, okay, that actually helped me deal with this. Because a lot of the stuff he had also came from the Eastern traditions.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, you know, one of the things that's been irritating me lately is that you get, and I'm probably going to piss somebody off, but you get a lot of people who get invested in, like, say, there's ghost hunting or whatever, and they have this whole, like, this whole thing, this is this, and this is this, and this is this, and none of it comes from anything other than somebody along the line said, oh, if you get a 3 of something, that means it's mocking the Trinity and it's a demon.
Right. Or the 3 scratches or the 3 knocks on the door.
Right.
Oh,
exactly. God. And it's like everything becomes part of this belief system that's not based on anything substantial. It's just arbitrary. Like, we're assuming this is one thing. We happen to be Christian, so we believe in demons. So then this is this and this is this. And it's not. How did one person put it to me? I had a medium on once, and I thought she would be like this. And when we got talking a little bit about demons, she goes, I don't really think there are demons. She's like, I think there are things that are not friendly to us. She's like, but sometimes I think it's something trying to get our attention, and it doesn't realize it's hurting us. So it might scratch us, but it's not trying to hurt us. It's just trying as hard as it can to get our attention.
Like what we might play with a bug.
Right. If you trying to get a moth to move or something and accidentally kill it because you touched it too hard. So, I mean, but that, you know, listening to some of these people spout out, you know, their lore on what all this stuff is, and they're absolutely certain about it.
Right.
I think can be more detrimental to the people who are experiencing the stuff.
Yeah.
Because, again, like you were saying, belief is important. And if you're telling someone they have a demon,
yeah,
that's not something you want someone to force into reality, you know?
That is something that could be essentially dangerous. I mean, I think a lot of that, what you're talking about there, Seriah, unfortunately comes from the Warrens.
It starts with the Warrens.
I think they put a lot of that into their work, and then it just seeped into popular culture, and it seeped into whoever else that they trained. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I really noticed this whole thing recently of just how they really came from that whole, like, Catholic traditionalist tradition.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, like Malachi Martin and all those guys. And, you know, that stuff has become really popularized now because of the movies, like the whole Conjuring and the Conjuring universe, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's like, and it's really steeped into this real traditional Catholicism. And I felt like when I watched, just as an aside, when I watched that last one, the Nun, I felt like I felt like I was being like, it was like a Catholic recruiting film. That's what I felt.
Maybe
like,
Mel Gibson has something to do with
it.
Yeah. But I think going back to what you were saying, like it's that people can't deal with uncertainty, and whereas a lot of this phenomenon to people like us who are kind of existential and used to uncertainty and the absurd, you know, we're like, oh well, yeah, this is, you know, it's just confirming what we already kind of are starting to learn about reality through our lives. But to a lot of people, they need these systems and they need certainty, and they try to put certainty on top of shit that's just totally blowing out, you know, all these paradigms.
Well, and popular culture and horror movies don't help. I mean, this comes from this whole idea. Hollywood has really tainted.
It is the mythology of the people,
right?
I mean,
the supernatural stuff has been really tainted, I think, by Hollywood. So this is where you get those ideas of like the 3, all these like mocking of the Holy Trinity, and like, you know, the knocking 3 times. I've actually heard that described. I think Dave Schrader described like, well, when you normally knock on somebody's door, you knock 3 times. So if it's a dead person doing it, they're probably going to knock 3 times.
Well, and the thing, okay, so here's the other thing. Like, let's say somebody's in a household with a lot of tension, And we know from parapsychological research, and this is one of the things, a lot of people who do like ghost hunting and stuff do not know the parapsychological research.
Right.
They don't look at this stuff. They're not interested in it. They just want to go hunting for ghosts. The problem comes when they don't realize that, for instance, poltergeists, in almost every case, there is a source, there's a pattern. It seems to be unconscious psychokinetic energy. It doesn't mean it can't also be used by an entity, but it's coming from a person. It's starting with a person. It's always a person who has, it's usually like a teenage girl who's in a broken home or being abused or something like that. And that type of stuff is going to come out. It's going to come out different ways with different people. And some people apparently just have this natural PK to them where they can affect the environment. They don't know they're doing it, but that's how it's coming out. So if you go into a place where there's a lot of stress, a lot of trauma, and you tell them they have a demon, not only are you making the situation worse, but you're not addressing the problem, which is whatever's causing that initial stress. In fact, you're giving that stress a name by saying, oh, yeah, all that stuff that was happening to you, all the stress you're under, that's because of the demon, rather than saying you need to deal with this stress and then all this other stuff will go away.
Yeah, I think that's a disconnect. A lot of people don't understand that psychological things can create paranormal conditions.
Absolutely. And that's not to say there aren't spirits out there. We don't know if there are spirits out there, but we definitely know there are situations which can mimic spirits.
And if you get into Jung and stuff, of course, then it's like, that realization that there is a connection between psychology and the paranormal and the spiritual. So, then that's just kind of how I see it, because I've been into Jung so long, but there's a real disconnect where like, oh, we have to put, everything in separate worlds, and you get real orthodox people on both sides.
Mm-hmm. And also you have situations where parapsychologists have been able to identify the poltergeist source. They know like this girl is what's causing it. She doesn't know she's doing, but she's causing it. So they get her some psychological counseling, and the poltergeist activity dies down.
Yeah.
It's like, so there's a direct one-to-one correlation. Again, this isn't to say that there isn't maybe a spirit there that's going, ooh, look at this energy I can use.
Right.
But even if that is it, you're reducing the energy by reducing the stress in this girl, who now has an outlet because she can talk to a therapist. And it's we don't understand how much we affect the world around us. I think it's part of the problem. It's kind of like hypnosis with UFO things. What might be a shamanic awakening gets treated as a negative, hostile entity, invading your home and stealing your sperm.
When the vast majority is positive or at least neutral of those type of experiences.
But anytime fear enters into it, it makes it worse. And like things like hypnosis or telling someone they have a demon, instead of assuaging that fear and helping them deal with it, it's making it worse.
Yeah, and this is that taint I think that Hollywood has put on this stuff. It's been, and the ghost hunting shows as well.
The ghost hunting shows, not as much ghost hunters. Like ghost hunters did not do that very much, at least, especially in the early days they didn't. I stopped watching at a certain point, but they took it straight ahead. Let's see what's going on here. They never threw out demon and all this other stuff. It was shows like Paranormal State, I think, that really started that type of thing.
Yeah, which was all associated with the Warrens. Yeah. I mean,
was it?
Oh yeah.
That's probably why I never liked that.
Lorraine was on the show several times. I mean, they were all associated with the Warrens. I mean, and not coming down on Catholics or whatever, but it was also it also, Ryan definitely came from that worldview, and that's the worldview that he came from, and that's the worldview that was shown on the show, for sure.
Really disturbing, because it seemed like the girl that they were trying to do a exorcism on showed all the signs of being schizophrenic. And instead of this girl getting help, she's being used on a TV show for entertainment.
Right.
So, and the Warrens were just scam artists. They really were. And the fact that they have kind of had such an influence on this stuff, I guess, shows, because they were scammers.
I'm kind of conflicted on them because I think Ed kind of was that kind of scammer with a little bit of pragmatism. He was very much the opportunist, like with the and it's slipping my mind now what the case was called, but the one that was in Conjuring 2 that they had nothing to do with.
Enfield,
thank you. Yeah, and in Enfield, he showed up one day and tried to get as much in on it as he could, and Guy Lyon Playfair and the other guy wouldn't let him do it, and they wouldn't let him in the house. So he definitely was an opportunist. Now Lorraine, I believe, was a true believer.
I think she was. However, that doesn't mean that she didn't also milk it at times.
Oh yeah, they definitely milked it.
But yeah,
he definitely milked it.
One of the things that really pissed me off about the second Conjuring movie, I mean, leave aside the fact that they weren't even involved in the case.
Yeah, they had nothing to do with it. Yeah.
Ed came to the main guy there, Guy, and he had talked to him about the case, and he said, look, I know a way that we can make a lot of money from this case.
Right.
And Guy said, this is not about money. This is about helping this family. What is wrong with you? And he sent him away. But when you watch The Conjuring 2, it's Ed Warren telling Guy, this is about the family. You got to, get your head straight. And I'm like, oh, my God, are you freaking serious?
History has been rewritten. Yeah, yes. Exactly. And there was so much stuff, as I kind of came up into all this, and, a haunting was like the big thing. That was the big special. Remember, like they did the first one they ever did was Haunting in Connecticut, right?
Okay.
And that was the whole one about the family that bought the old funeral home, and she started to mop the floor and there was blood on the floor. First of all, if that happened, I'd be out. It's like the Eddie Murphy.
Fair enough.
The Eddie Murphy skit, from his stand up, but so Carmen Reed and all that stuff, and the kid that was dying of cancer and all that. Now, they wrote a book about it, I guess, In a Dark Place, I think was the book. And the guy who ghost wrote that book, along with the Warrens, along with Carmen Reed, has later came out and said a lot of that stuff wasn't true.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's really damning. And that is what a lot, and that case is a lot of what the kind of this mythology has been based on.
And I'm not going to say there's not stuff out there that might want to hurt us, but I think it's more the way a snake wants to hurt a mouse. It's just how it is. It's not evil. It's evil from our viewpoint. I mean, kittens are not evil to us, but to a mouse, they're pretty damn evil.
Right.
They're life and death. I think it's just perspective. Whereas the demon thing suggests that there are entities out there with nothing else other to do than attack us.
Well, it's kind of this whole idea in my mind, because I do believe that there probably is good and evil entities out there, but I also had to in my thought process include the fact that there's probably neutral ones as well that just don't care. And I mean that's very much fit into something like the jinn. That's how they're described in Islamic mythology, and I think that's much more what we're dealing with is this, good, there's bad,
because
neutral.
A lot of this maybe is us bleeding over into their realm also. So a lot of them might be looking at us like, what the hell are you doing here, or seeing us like we see them, like they see us as a ghost, when we're seeing each other.
Some of the ancient Greek ideas of what a daemon was actually a human spirit.
Different.
Yeah. Was actually a human spirit that was, if it was evil in life, it was evil in death.
And Patrick Harper uses that daemon idea for what's going on around us. I mean, he has taken that ancient idea and Jung's concepts and turned it into a fairly good explanation of the paranormal. I mean, if anyone's not read Daemonic Reality by Patrick Harper, they should. It's utterly mind-blowing.
That's one I'm going to need to check out, I think, because you guys
Yes.
reference that quite a lot on Where Did the Road Go?
And when you read it, you'll understand why. And he's such a nice guy. Like when I had him on, one of the things I said to him, I didn't think he was going to do the interview because I'd never seen any interviews with him. And I said to him, like, so do you do a lot of interviews? And he said, no. And I'm thinking, oh, really? So why did you come on here? He's like, well, no one else has ever asked. And I'm like, what? How has nobody ever asked you, you know?
I guess just everyone just takes it for granted. It's just kind of like a staple.
Well, he's also giving sort of a unified theory of the paranormal that works. And, you know, like if you look at Coast to Coast, they're going with whatever's popular.
Yeah, we've talked to one of our older friends about this stuff as far as like, he's like, you know, you're one or two things. You're trying to get to the bottom of things. You're trying to add more mystery so you can keep milking it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And most people are trying to keep milking it.
Yeah.
Whereas one of the things I wanted to be able to do with my show is kind of get a few of these puzzle pieces. I mean, I don't know if it's something we can ever solve.
Yeah, we're not going to get to like the actual bottom of it, so might as well actually dig, right? Like,
yeah, see what we can find. What more can we, and what happens? What other questions are we going to have? Because I think it's sort of one of those eternal question things. Okay, we understand this now, and now we have 10 more interesting questions, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that we're ever going to be able to prove any of this stuff materially. I know we've had this discussion before,
No,
Seriah.
probably not.
But I just don't think that we're ever going to do it, and I don't think that the scientific establishment is going to like take this stuff
a lot of
seriously.
them probably think that these AI overlord oracles are going to tell us the secrets of existence.
Yeah, well, that's the whole, you know, Ray Kurzweil when he was asked, do you believe in God? Do you believe God exists? And he said, not yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of shit is coming a lot quicker than we are thinking.
Maybe.
Are you, were you a fan of cyberpunk science fiction?
Occasionally. I didn't get into a lot of it.
Cool. Well, a lot of that William Gibson stuff has paranormal elements and has these entities, these ghosts in the machines, these artificial intelligences who are like these almost these voodoo gods that are in, you know, the Matrix or the, you know, whatever the net evolves into. That shit's pretty wild too.
And I mean, if consciousness is like just more than the sum of its parts, if it just needs a complex system to exist, then hypothetically, we will be able to make a conscious AI at some point. We may not even do it intentionally.
Right.
You know, the internet itself may become conscious at some point because it's such a complex system. Because we don't know how consciousness works.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, and whether we are the result of consciousness organizing matter to create this interface, and like maybe if we create this other thing, though, it'll be kind of it's letting something else in. It may not be the same thing as us, and those are the things that keep me up at night.
There were some things that Seriah, you wanted to run by Seriah.
Well, we don't get a chance to really talk to many people who are really into the occult. So there's some things I've been really thinking about because of some recent experiences I've been having, and I guess it all really centers around how much of a door and a gateway drug a lot of Christian anti-occult stuff can be for people to first be exposed to how prevalent occultism is in culture and start going down that rabbit hole. I know that was a big part of my getting into a lot of this stuff, but kind of what are your thoughts about these ideas between the relationship between occult symbolism and power, and I guess a lot of these more like Christian based researchers try to use the symbolism in film and music and even older architecture and things like this that have elements of mythology, of Western esoteric tradition, and they try to use it as this proof of a some kind of evil plan and scheme, and that the elites are using occultism against us to control us, and these kind of ideas, because it's strange. There's a lot of crossover in the research between these two camps. So it's kind of easy to get them mixed up sometimes, I feel like.
Yeah, give me an example.
Well, say people saying that, there's, Washington, D.C. is laid out in this grid of sacred geometry, or it's a pentagram. That's because they must be Satan worshipers, or this film has this symbolism.
Just watch Skywatch TV and you'll...
Yeah, or this... 2001 has all this symbolism, and it's Luciferian, and
I see. Okay,
like the Bill Cooper kind of stuff.
Yeah,
kind of. Yeah.
When I kind of see it as just artists and people are doing what they've always done and use mythology and symbolism in their art and in their storytelling, because that's what people have always done. And the fact that there really are these secret traditions within the Western world, and America itself is really can be seen as an occult and at least Freemasonic project.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
But I don't see it as necessarily some big evil thing,
No, not at all. The thing is, the pentagram is not an evil symbol. That's the other thing. It's Christians have turned it into that, and not all Christians. When I say something like, "Well, Christians did this," I'm talking about the extremists, the ones who are trying to control the populace, not the average, everyday person who just believes in Jesus and goes to church. But the controlling factors in Christianity have tried to turn this. Yeah. And so, they've changed a lot of positive symbols and the negative ones. I mean, even the swastika, until the Nazis got a hold of it, was not a negative symbol. I mean, they did irrevocable damage to the symbol. We'll never be able to look at it for what it was originally. And when people see it on ancient art, they're like, why are there swastikas on there? Because it was a symbol of life that the Nazis literally inverted. I had
they turned it on its side.
Yeah.
Which people don't realize either.
So there was a guy I had been talking to when I first started the show here and there, and he got on this kick one day because, and I think part of it's because he was getting a lot of hits on a show he did about a pentagram that was a park in where was it? It was just outside of Russia, one of the little states outside of Russia, between Russia and Europe, Western Europe there. But there's a park where the roads, the pathways literally make a pentagram, and he's freaking out about it, talking about how this is satanic, and that it's these people showing off about how they're evil satanic people. I'm like, or someone just laid it out in a star. Yes. I'm like, or a metalhead did it and went, it'd be cool. Let's make a pentagram.
Right.
Beavis and Butthead are there, going, I know what we're going to do. I mean, to assume that because something means something to you does not mean it means something to someone else.
Right.
So jumping to the conclusion of anytime you see a symbol that you think means evil, it could have just been a coincidence. And if it's not a coincidence, it might be because it means something entirely different to the person who devised it.
Well, do you think, though, that the elite in this world have a different religion than the masses, and that they're more inclined to believe in magic, and they'd be stupid not to because they're after resources, obviously? So wouldn't they be into something that worked?
So, yeah, I do think that there is a pretty nasty undercurrent there.
Yeah.
Of the ultra elite. I mean, we know they do rituals when they do that whole thing up in the Northwest there. Oh, what's it called? The Bohemian Grove.
Yeah, Bohemian Grove. Right. The whole owl ceremony. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's tiebacks to all kinds of stuff there. I mean, they want to control the world, and they do. And so I would think that
occult things.
They do use occult things. Absolutely. And because some of that stuff works, it doesn't mean that what they think is happening is what's happening either. But I also, sometimes I wonder, when we hear about, I mean, how much do these people that the general populace has no idea of? So what are we perceiving wrongly? There could be things out there that don't look dastardly that are really worse than anything else they're doing.
Yeah.
Because we just don't understand it.
And I think it doesn't mean that we shouldn't use the occult also, or that it necessarily is just this political thing, but it's a neutral thing like any other resource or power that, of course, the people who are running things would use it. They'd be stupid not to. But that doesn't mean we can't use it, and that it can't be used for the agency of good or the common people. And a lot of good things that we've got to today is the result of that. Definitely the revolutionary era in Europe and in the United States and France. A lot of that came out of secret societies and Illuminism and these things. And and here in America, the progressive era had a lot to do. The abolitionists were really tied in with the spiritualists, and a lot of the first female leadership was involved in spiritualism and theosophy. And theosophy had a lot of anti-imperialist stuff to it. So it's just this. I would like people to see things more nuanced and not in this black and white. Oh, see the evil elite use occult against us, in Hollywood and things like that. Like, these people are telling stories.
Yeah,
that's what people do, is use mythology and symbolism to tell stories. That's the point of stories, and I don't know, but I think a lot of people who aren't Christian fundamentalists are using a lot of this Christian fundamentalist material, and they're not realizing that a lot of this stuff is part of their heritage too.
True,
or their inheritance.
There is, and I fully believe that there are pedophile rings being run out of these higher things, and I don't think you get any worse than that.
No.
Magic's a tool. I think it's a way of interacting with the universe around you and a way of tuning yourself to it, but it's not good or bad. It's how you use it. I mean, a gun can be used for good or bad means. A knife can be used for good or bad means. It's just another tool. But I think some of the stuff they're doing is just beyond imaginable to most of us. And it's because they're so separated from the rest of reality. Like they're untouchable. It takes, the only way that some of them probably get a thrill is to have absolute total control over someone else. Which is where you get human trafficking and all this other crap. And I'm not talking the Pizzagate stuff. I think that was absolute crap.
That was the political ploy.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that stuff happens. These rings of pedophiles have come out, and it's frightening how many there are.
Well, we got a whole lot of conspiracy theory out of you tonight.
Yeah, we
didn't expect that.
Yeah, that's not even conspiracy theory. Go look at the news, because they don't talk about it that much. But if you look, it's there, and you see all these political, connected people being arrested for human trafficking, for pedophile rings, for prostitution rings, so on and so forth. And it's just like, it's unfortunately more common than uncommon.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just goes back to they have a very aristocratic attitude, and and people have got off on abusing people lower than them for a long time.
Well, this is the thing, is that you've got to look at the cases that have been substantiated.
Exactly.
And then look at the things that might just be sensationalism. We were just talking about this in the last episode with Jenny and the Patreon segment we did about these 3 girls that were killed in Spain in 1992. There's actually this 5-part documentary on Netflix about this that is very well worth watching. But stuff started to come out, and there was all this sensationalism about them, about what happened, that they were killed by these rich elite pedophiles that, mutilated their bodies and buried them and blamed somebody else. And so you've got this regular amount of sensationalism on this stuff, but then you have things like the Dutroux affair in Belgium, which is documented. You have the Franklin cover-up here in the United States, which is documented. There's other documented things where you say, well, maybe there's a little bit something to this. Maybe there's a little bit of truth. And I think that's where we're going with some of what Seriah is talking about in this sensationalism, because a lot of that now because I used to really inhabit that world a lot, is just they've got to keep this stuff rolling. This train
They gotta keep milking it.
They got to keep milking it. You got to keep going with it. You got to keep saying the same stuff that you were saying 10, 15 years ago, because there's probably people that haven't heard it. And they're going to think that it's the most amazing thing in the world. And for people like me, and I think all three of us really, it's just like it's old hat. You know, we've heard it and heard it now, and it's kind of there's a little bit of a parallel to the UFO community in that too, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so we've got that factor that's going on there, but you know, people really you gotta really be critical about it and think, you know, say like, what can we prove? What can we document? Not just go on what somebody says or what somebody does.
Or what you believe. And
a lot of this stuff I discovered, and I started getting into a lot of that stuff, but then I really discovered that a lot of this, especially what Seriah was talking about, is just a continuation of the satanic panic from the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
That's all it is. They keep trying to these people, they keep trying to bring it back and trying to recycle it and put it in something else. And occasionally you've got the Illuminati witch that comes out and says that he was involved.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we've actually interviewed a person like that on the show very early on. You know, it's like, that is, I think it's a par for the course in the same way that what the Warrens did in the sensationalism. And this is just the thing that we have to deal with in this alternative media market right now.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, and it's a gateway. It's a gateway drug to actual occultism. You know, this might be the first time that's
the irony of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's where I first heard about occult ideas, was through Christian anti-occult propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
true.
That's pretty wild, and they take a whole lot of stuff. And like you've said before, Adam, like a lot of these people were like anti-secret societies and everything. They almost have this like air of knowing the secrets of, you know, of superiority, and they're actually obsessed with this shit, and they just study it all day every day, so they might as well be a part of the occult world.
Yeah, they're considered, I think, illuminated too, right? I mean, what's the whole idea in Freemasonry with the Cowan, right? That's somebody that knows this stuff, but they're not a Freemason. They haven't taken that step. That's a Cowan, right?
Or trying.
That's correct, right?
They're trying. They're profane.
Yeah. You know, like Manly P. Hall, he wasn't a Freemason to begin with. He just studied all this, and then eventually the Masons were like, "Well, you already know everything, so why don't you just become one?"
Yeah, I don't know. People are too. There was an article we read a short time ago that talks about how facts don't really matter, because people are more likely to just believe what they want to believe, what feels better to their worldview. And then we're all guilty of this. I mean, someone says to me, "Oh, you know, there's this video I have of some paranormal thing happening," and what goes through my mind immediately is, "Yeah, it's fake." And it may not be. But it's just, I've seen so many fake ones. I've just gotten to the point where none of these things look real to me anymore. And I'm thinking, what if I am looking at a real one? Would I even know at this point? Because, you know, the technology is so good now, you couldn't even tell. So you'd almost look at saying and be like, "Oh, that's a really clear picture of whatever. It's probably fake because it's too clear." But what if it's not fake, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the kind of the problem right now, especially in the UFO community. Well, we talked about that, I think, in that roundtable that we did a little bit. I don't know if that might have been in one of the asides that we did while you weren't recording, but this whole deep fake thing that's going on right now.
Oh yeah,
you know, where that's starting to that's really going to mess people up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the end of a whole, you know, political blackmail game.
Yeah,
or at least they're gonna try. You know, I think the next scandal we have, like if the Trump grab him by the, you know what, tape came out now, you know, he could just be like, "Oh, it's a deep fake."
Right.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that, and one time on the phone, me and Seriah, and he's like, and I told him, I said, "Well, you know, man, like the UFO community has been dealing with this for 10 years."
Oh yeah,
maybe more. This is
to
like
the point where no one with sense believes any kind of video evidence, pretty much.
Yeah. So
even coming from the Air Force, supposedly, it's like whatever.
But you got like the secure team.
Well, especially coming from the Air Force.
Yeah.
You got the secure team 10 stuff that's out there that people are just like they don't know, like anybody that has any kind of like idea of what's really going on, they don't buy any of that stuff because so much of it can be easily faked because the technology is so good.
Yeah. And I should take that back. I don't think the stuff we've gotten from the Air Force has been fake. I just don't think it's what they're pretending it is. I think it
might be fake. I'm there with you.
I don't know. I think a lot of it's probably test craft.
Not trusting them is a good way to go, though.
Yeah, and I find the UFO community is amusing like that, whereas if the UFO community says there's nothing up there, they go, they're lying. They say, okay, there is. Oh, well, then they're telling us the truth, and everything they say is true. And it's like, they're still lying to you.
Well, there's been a weird shift. I really don't mean to go off on this, but there's been.
I think we talk about this.
But there's been a weird shift now. I've noticed with some of the younger UFO crowd. I'm gonna
get off my lawn.
I'm gonna get in trouble with this, but. Where they're now just kind of like, well, the government holds all the cards, so we just got to trust whatever they say, which if you go back to the UFO community forever, it's been like, we can't trust anything the government says about this. It's just been this weird shift.
Well, the younger crowd hasn't been through all the nonsense they put everyone else through. They get to do it all again.
Yeah.
Hey, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
They need to go back and they need to, they pick up Jacques Vallée's Messengers of Deception and see how much stuff the government really does have into all this stuff. But the problem with anything, the problem with any conspiracy theory, the problem with any theories about any of this stuff is that no one really knows. No one can really solidly prove anything. So if we like jump into one of the bigger conspiracies like 9/11, I think it's safe to say that no matter what actually happened, the government lied to us.
Hey.
I think that
I agree.
That's a safe thing to say. But beyond that, it gets sketchier and sketchier. And yes, there are things out there that don't make sense, but it doesn't mean that just because you could connect the dots this way, that's the truth, because there may be other pieces we don't see that the dots would connect better to. And we may never know the complete and total truth. I mean, we still don't really know what happened with JFK. I think you'd be foolish to think it wasn't a conspiracy if you take a good look at the information. But exactly who did what is a little bit harder to figure out. You can see who benefited from it, which is the military-industrial complex. But even so, did they directly do it, or did they just let it happen?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we're just never going to know.
The world may never know.
Yeah.
And the problem is people act like they know because they believe.
Right.
And they don't make that discernment from belief and fact. We have very little facts in this world, but we have a lot of belief.
Yeah, we do. And we've talked about this several times too on this show, just how conspiracy theory has become, it's become its own religion in many ways. I mean, people really, it's an alternative narrative to what is in the history books. And to say like, well, we don't really know, then all of a sudden, you're like, for some of the people in the conspiracy community, you're committing a grave sin by even saying that. Howard Zinn, the historian, he said something very practical. And I remember Alex Jones getting all upset about this back in was this 2008, 2009? Zinn said something like, Zinn may have been dead by then, I'm not sure, but he said something about the whole Kennedy assassination thing, we're just never going to know what actually happened there, so it's useless debating it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to understand that it was not a single shooter.
Right.
There were political connections there.
Right. But I agree with Zinn 50% on that but I do think that just like as an historian, there's nowhere else you can go. You can't prove anything else. You just have to go to You just have to go to what you can prove as a historian, and I get that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the same way a scientist can't really prove the paranormal because they're limited in their scope. And I get what he was saying there.
So the problem is this. The government has blatantly lied to the people so many times that there are people out there who simply will not believe anything they say and assume everything is a lie. So no matter how honest the government is, and the government's rarely completely honest, they always try to spin it to someone's advantage, that doesn't mean that everything is a conspiracy. It doesn't mean that they're behind every shooting that happens or every terrorist attack that happens. I mean, they've certainly been guilty of false flags in the past. That is in the historical record. That has nothing to do with conspiracy theories. It was a conspiracy. There have been a number of them over the history of the United States. It doesn't mean that everything that happens is a conspiracy. But when you lie to someone over and over and over and over, why would they believe you?
Yeah. Right, and we can't even agree on the shape of the Earth now because of essentially because of that. Yeah. It's if they're lying to us about everything else, why are we believing them on this? They lied to us about Kennedy, so they must be lying to us about the shape of the Earth.
Yeah, but that's a long jump. There's a lot of little steps.
There's a lot of little steps in between. Yeah, you're right.
So maybe the Earth is flat, and it's like, maybe the Earth is flat.
Should we switch a little bit to new thought stuff?
I don't know that much about this other than what I listened to on your show.
Okay. Well, Sergio knows a little bit about it.
What do you want to know?
Well, the one thing I'll say about it is you were talking about The Secret, and I'm vaguely familiar with The Secret, but anytime I heard someone talking about that type of stuff, I always associated it with the Seth work with Jane Roberts, because it seemed like a dumbed down version of how Seth was talking about the way the universe works. But you're saying it comes from the New Thought stuff, which kind of took that out of context for me a little bit. I didn't realize that. And I guess, because Seth never said, if you just want something bad enough, it'll happen. But Seth talked about the way that we create, the universe works in symbols, and communication happens in the symbolic language and stuff like that. That's very deep. And he talked about creating your own reality, but how it happens on an unconscious level, and how, like, say, if there's something you need to deal with, you'll keep manifesting it in your reality till you deal with it, which is a lot different than saying, I want money, let's just focus on money till I get it.
Right. I mean, really, I think it really comes down to a fundamental understanding of a magical reality, of the fact that consciousness comes first and influences reality, and that's the general kind of hermetic idea that was kind of distilled into some of this New Thought stuff. And really, I think it's seen as being a lot more materialistic, because I think it was like a series of distillations into a more and more popular form. But underneath it, I think if you peel the layers back, you can get to the actual Hermeticism, and that's the idea that consciousness creates
matter.
Yeah.
And I think that's true.
So it's also just like I was talking about with how this like anti-occult Christian stuff can be a door into the occult. The more profane New Thought stuff can also be a doorway, and there's nothing wrong with there being some popular outlets, and a lot of these will be people's first encounter with ideas that they, and if someone wants to continue to study, continue to understand this stuff, I think it's real positive.
I found it interesting that you mentioned that Trump was a part of this, because when you look at the way Trump does stuff, like, he'll just say something, it's completely untrue, has no connection to reality whatsoever, and then he just keeps saying it and saying it. And the next thing you know, other people are saying it too, like it's true, and it's like, what did he just do there?
It's affirmations.
That manifestation.
But he didn't make it real, but he backed his view of it, like with nothing other than just repeated statements,
Well, and have you ever read this book, Occult America by Mitch Horowitz?
No, but I've heard of it.
I'd really recommend it. And he's kind of like, he's really rehabilitating a lot of this New Thought stuff for the 21st century, I feel like. And now he's even rehabilitating for a mass audience LaVey. And, you know, he's
really?
kind of, he's the head of the, of what is it, Penguin's New Age imprint. What is that called?
Yeah.
And he's, you know, he's like, you know, real big in really popular New Age circles, and really like writing all these like New Thought books. You know, they're coming out with new editions where he's doing big introductions to all these classic New Thought books. But he's even going back to LaVey and saying that a lot of LaVey's magical ideas were pretty much New Thought about, you know, willing your you know, affecting reality with your will, and like these techniques that LaVey gives of like doing your rituals so that you get it out of your head and you feel like you've already got it. And it's really interesting. So he's you know, I didn't see that coming, as far as he's actually like trying to repackage LaVey for a mass audience. So I thought that was crazy.
Well, I mean, if you take Satan out of LaVey's stuff, it you know, people would be much more okay with it. It's that, you know, the Satan aspect freaks people out.
And the more materialistic New Thought, like the stuff that you're kind of critiquing, was pretty much that. Like it was this like selfish, you know, materialistic way of thinking about, you know, how you're going to get what you want out of life. Yeah. And it's uniquely American. I mean, and a lot of this comes out of the idea of like, there's never been a place like America where so many people were in sales, where it was really all up to you and you talking to people and you getting people to buy shit. Like that never really happened on the level that happened here, with so much pressure on these people that they felt they had to really pull into the metaphysical world to get the things they need to make it happen.
Well, some of it's not even metaphysical. Some of it's just understanding how like there are little techniques you can do to make someone believe you, to sell something. Like when I worked at Best Buy for a little while.
They would call it lesser magic.
Yeah, I worked at Best Buy for a little while, and they would teach you all these little things, like for example, assuming the sale. Like you go through and you'd show someone this computer system, and when you got done, you were supposed to be like, okay, so can I just package this up and we'll go up to the, you know, thing, without them ever saying, okay, I'll take it. You just assume they're going to take it and you keep going. And that's kind of something very similar, but there's nothing magical about it. It's that people tend to follow.
And you're putting the reality in words first.
Yeah. But it's not even, but there's nothing really esoteric about it. It's just the way people behave. It's sort of building on that weakness that people have, you know, and just running with it.
Well, the connection with Trump and all this is that Trump's church that he went to in New York City, was Norman Vincent Peale's church.
That's the father of positive thinking.
Yeah, Norman Vincent Peale was very much involved with all this New Thought stuff, and he did all these kind of like New Thought records and these like positive thinking, and he was also a Christian minister.
And he's kind of the thing is, a lot of these early New Thought guys were a little more progressive, but then people like Norman Vincent Peale and some of these later guys who had relationships to Christian Science too, were really involved in the history of the right wing in America, and especially where we are today. There's all these weird...
Right. That's why you got stuff like the family that's out there, that, you know, the National Prayer Breakfast people, that they really extol this idea of, like, you know, supporting the leaders, supporting the people that are on top, rather than doing what is in traditional Christianity, where you're supposed to help the poor and the needy and all that. Yeah. They say that people will lead from above. We need to cultivate those people. And that's a very, I think in some ways, a very New Thought idea. And there was some, I think with, there was also some interesting connections with the New Age, with like New Agers and some Hermeticists from Southern California to some of that stuff too. That was interesting connections.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I think it just can be used for good or ill, just like the occult and other magical systems.
Yeah. Well, most stuff can. I mean, that's the thing. I was just thinking of some things. I mean, you have people who have speaking styles that they work on so that they draw you in and they keep you interested. And sometimes they use it for storytelling. Yeah. They're going to tell kids stories.
Yeah, well, a lot of that goes to hypnotism.
Yeah, it really does. And other times they do it because they're trying to sell you something. Whether it be an idea or a book or, or whatever product, a new TV.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that like this New Thought stuff got distilled for these businessmen as sales techniques, and then and also hypnotism and mesmerism got turned into and neurolinguistic programming, which was a psychological technique to heal people. This stuff all got wrapped up into materialistic aims and how to manipulate people and sell. So it's like all this stuff kind of coalesced and got turned into this like occult businessman hypnotist shit.
Yeah.
There's the book that Adam Parfrey co-wrote called The Secret Source. That's very good. That's kind of the roots of New Thought, and then also it's steeped into how it's steeped into Hermeticism as well. So,
and like Mesmer has such a continuing influence, like when you read it and you read all the lingo they used at the time, you're like animal magnetism. What is that? But you ask one out of two people, and they're going to believe in energy and talk about energy. It's the same thing. I mean,
oh yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many different versions of energy. I mean, even Kundalini, every culture seems to have a different name for it. I mean, if you look at it under a Christian context, it may simply be bringing in the Holy Spirit. There are laughing churches that are very Christian, and then they think bringing in the Holy Spirit is this laughter, but that laughter is also a symptom of Kundalini awakening, and it can be spread from person to person,
right? Just
like these churches are doing. So a lot of it's just the same thing by a different name. Same mountain, different paths to the top, different names.
Yeah, that's one of those condemnations by some more mainstream Christians and some of especially with the charismatic Christian movement of saying that there's a lot of occultism that's in there. But I find that interesting that when you've got these occult kind of practices that are actually being co-opted by some of the charismatic Christians, and they have no idea. It's interesting how this stuff just kind of seeps in there because I think it's just so old and part of the human condition.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, that's what's unfortunate. I think a lot of this fundamentalist stuff is like looking at things that are unavoidable and syncretism and these. I mean, how they're just. I think people are looking for fundamentalism when it's like. It's so hard to find, and having examples of these things does not mean that these things are necessarily evil. It's just what happens when you have ideas and religions spread across cultures and centuries. You can't stop it.
Yeah, and people like to fight about it all.
That's very true.
I'm glad we can all get along and just talk crap.
Well, you know what? I totally respect people believing whatever they want to believe. That's their business. As long as you're not trying to force it on other people. It's when they start forcing it on other people that it becomes a problem. And I don't feel like there's any particular thing necessarily that's bad. Like, I know really good Christians and I've met really bad Christians. And it's like, it's not the fact that they're Christian, it's the person.
Right.
And that goes for any religion, any belief system. Good people tend to do the good things no matter what they believe. Bad people want to control everything.
Right. Exactly. And it doesn't matter where you come from.
Exactly.
It's just the nature of the person. That's really what it comes down to, I think. I think you're 100% right on that.
And a lot of times when these movements start, they generally start out pretty positive, and then people start manipulating them.
Yeah.
It's human nature. And so the key is trying to defeat that human nature, and I don't know that there's an easy way to do that.
Good luck.
I mean, waking up to some of this stuff, like enlightenment might be the only way to do it, who was it? Was it Graham Hancock that said everyone who goes into Congress or the Senate or whatever should have to take a ayahuasca journey first?
Yeah, I think he did say something like that. Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's not for everyone, but it makes the point that by doing that, you'd have to face some of your own demons and be more self-aware of the effect you're having on others. And those are the type of people we want actually running things.
Yep. I think that's a good place.
Of course, that'll never happen.
Yeah.
Oh, you do you?
No.
You're just gonna end just like that?
Oh. Well, I don't know.
I thought that's what you meant when you said it's a good place. Like, that's a good place to stop.
Yeah. But, yeah. So.
Did I leave you speechless? I'm sorry.
You might have. You usually do, Seriah. You're very good at that.
Huh. Is that good or bad?
I'd say that's a pretty good thing.
All right. Okay. Excellent.
Well, we've been all over the place. This has been great discussion.
Yeah. I like when you can't find where the road's going.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
That's the point. Yeah,
Well,
there you go. There we go.
And recently, with a lot of these shows, we've just been getting so deep. It's been really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, absolutely.
I really hope we're not alienating anybody, but I think people who are a little more exposed to this stuff already really need stuff to listen to, where people go really deep on subjects.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an explorer of this stuff, yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? When I started my show, that's what I wanted to do. And I'm going, no one's going to listen to me. All anyone wants is the sensational stuff, because that's all I was seeing. Like, people were just reposting the sensational stuff.
Right.
I'm like, I'm going to try and take this on a deeper level and kind of get under all the sensationalism. And I'm like, nobody's going to care. So the fact that as many people care as they do, it thrills me beyond belief.
Well, the whole thing about podcasting, the way that I see it, is that you should be able to talk about this stuff uninterrupted without the stupid ad breaks and all that kind of jazz. You know,
sure.
And you should be able to listen to a conversation. And I think that's the beauty of podcasting.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot, and the thing is, I didn't start out as a podcast. I mean, it was there as a podcast from the beginning, but I mean, I was thinking more of the terms of a radio show and then putting it up as a podcast secondarily. But podcasting has taken off and has just been a fantastic thing. You know, I mean, it's so easy for people to get their voices heard.
Yep.
I'd say the biggest downfall, just like digital music, is there's too much of it, and too much of it's good.
Yeah.
Which seems like a weird complaint, but I kid you not, about 70 albums a week for the radio show.
Man, that's crazy.
And sometimes, I mean, I've gotten pretty good at flipping through them and deciding which ones sound interesting to me.
So are these digital, or are people mailing you?
Digital. It used to be like when people mailed them to me.
I was a loud rock director at a college radio station, so I was kind of in that same position, but we were just getting tons of CDs in the mail.
Yeah, at one point that was the case. I get like 30 CDs a week or so, and that's just for metal,
Yeah.
But now anyone can do it, which is awesome. Which means all these great independent bands are sending us stuff, but I don't have the time to listen to all of them. It doesn't exist, so I have to kind of sample through and then pull out the ones I think are the most interesting, and then play them. And if I have time, I'll listen to them some more. But I mean, so the upside is great. Anybody can do this. They don't have to rely on record labels and all this other nonsense. They can do it the way they want to do it. But the problem is now there's so much of it, sorting through it becomes difficult.
And how do you stand out for people like us, for the creators?
Exactly. If you're, and no disrespect to Joe Rogan. I like Joe Rogan a lot. I have liked him since he was on news radio. But, his show's big because he's Joe Rogan.
Yeah, exactly.
If he had to start from scratch, maybe he'd still get up to the point he is, because it's a good show, but there's no way of knowing because he didn't have to start from scratch. He already had a big name when he stepped into all of this.
Right, exactly.
It's like he does a quality show. It's not, he's out there and he sucks, but would he have succeeded like he has without the stuff he did prior? And of course he succeeded in the stuff he did prior because he's a talented guy.
Yeah.
So, but it seems like more and more bigger companies are sort of moving in the podcast direction, and I think they're trying to squeeze out some of the smaller podcasts.
We've noticed.
Yeah. Yeah, because they realize there's money to be made. So let's shove this stuff at the masses, this way.
But like I've been talking a lot with Adam, and you can totally relate because you're from some of these subcultures, but we're the underground bands, we're the real stuff, we're the authentic stuff, we're the real metal, we're the real punk, they are Green Day, they are post Black Album Metallica. This is what we've chosen, we've chosen to be authentic and to have substance, and it's not going to be as easy as if we were just trying to be exploitative. I mean, that's how it is.
We're more like Overkill.
Yeah.
Where we're putting out a consistent product time after time, and we'll always have people listening because they appreciate the product.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You're not just trying to get rid of me?
No, we never get rid of you.
Okay.
We pulled a pretty long shift today, man.
Yeah.
We went out searching for, we found a grave of this famous antiquarian from around here who said he was digging up giants and all kinds of malarkey, but it was we got stuck in traffic wasted a few good hours.
It was mostly in traffic.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Nashville traffic, which is always fun.
But we found the grave. We found his obelisk, his Osiris penis, and his historical state marker. And
interesting.
So, Seriah, we'll have you close this out.
I don't really know what you want me to say.
Well, we are doing this thing coming up.
Oh, yeah, you do. You are. Yeah, that's right. The Albatwitch Festival.
Yeah, the Albatwitch Festival. We're gonna give people apples.
The Albatwitch Festival is October 12th.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Is it October 12th? I actually got to look.
It actually is October 12th. You are correct. Yes.
It's October 12th in Columbia, Pennsylvania, and I should actually be at that one, along with Tim Renner and maybe some other special people I'm trying to pull out of the shadows. But you won't be there because you'll be preparing for the Strange Realities Conference on the 19th.
Yes, sir.
Which will also have Timothy Renner, as well as Joshua Cutchin and Tim Binal and other people that I don't remember. Ooh, I think Adam Sane's going to be there.
Yeah. That guy's going to be there. Mark Anthony Wyatt, we've got.
Ah, yes, Mark.
Zach Hunt, who is a local Nashvilleian, also a writer and a blogger.
Guy Malone.
From who lives in Roswell, New Mexico. He's actually from this area.
And Joe.
And our good friend Joe Damari, who's going to show everybody how to find ghosts.
All right, then. And do you have music too?
Yeah, we're working on that. There's gonna be music there. I've told several people to bring a guitar, trying to locate a banjo for Tim, if he wants to play. So we're gonna have that going on. Hopefully a few bands. My cousin's going to play as well. He plays his dad's songs that he's written. He does that all around Atlanta and around the South. So he's going to be there, and he's also going to be the MC for the event. And it's just going to be, it's an all-day thing. We're pretty much going to start like 10 o'clock in the morning. We're going to run until probably like midnight. And we're also going to do like a big panel discussion with a bunch of guests and probably some people that are going to be coming that are also kind of part of our extended family. And
nice.
That's going to be actually recording of this podcast of Conspirinormal. So
that's a really good idea.
Yeah, we're going to be on stage recording. That's going to be different.
Yeah, it's going to be weird. So
people can throw out all their questions to you as you record.
And throw beer bottles.
Yep.
Oh, beer bottles.
And
all right.
If people prepay right now, you go to our website, which is strangerealitiesconference.com. There is a link that says book now, and that'll take you to the Eventbrite page, and you can pay there. But if you prepay on the internet, it's $30 to go.
Okay.
And at the door, it's going to be $40.
And since I can't be there, Adam will be handing out hugs from me.
Okay.
If you want. Also, just feel free to hug Joshua. Just,
Yeah.
Go ahead and hug him.
Yeah. I can do that for sure.
No. I meant random people.
Random people. Yeah. Hug Joshua. Yeah. Hug Josh for sure.
It won't weird him out or anything. He'll be fine with it.
Yeah. So we're hoping to get a good crowd of people coming out. It's been interesting putting it together, but we just kind of.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right now, I just really.
I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Yeah, right now in the promotion stage of this whole thing. So.
Oh, that's the most fun. No, wait.
Yeah, right.
It's not the most fun.
Right.
Well, I hope it's successful. I hope you can do another one, and I hope I can make the next one.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. If it's successful, there will definitely be a next one, and we want you here. And bring Peter Robbins along with you.
So I could probably do that quite easily.
Yeah.
Maybe Mike Cleland. We'll just get in a truck together.
Awesome. Yeah. There you go.
All right. So I guess the show's over now. Are we done? Are we going to finish?
Yeah, we're going to finish.
All right. We're at theroadgo.com and
Conspirinormal.com.
StrangeRealitiesConference.com.
Yep.
Ooh, that one too.
Out. Thank you guys.
Yeah, that was good.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.